And for the last 10 years of that time, I've been researching creativity as an academic. And one of my favourite definitions of creativity is that creativity is the art of creating something valuable from nothing. The art of creating something valuable from nothing. But when we delve deeper into, well, what do we mean by nothing? Well, nothing is nothing that we have to pay for. It's nothing that is tangible. Nothing is like the ideas. Nothing is like the concept. Nothing is like the relationships that we create here. The seed that Gerard and Karen planted all those years ago has grown through that nothingness, the relationships, the ideas, the concepts, and it's still thriving, it's sustainable. And I've written several books, but last year I wrote this book, and the basis of my talk today about leadership is about lifelong learning. So this book, Learn to Lead, is an example of creating something from nothing. Because the book is created from my ideas and my lived experience over a 60-year period. And the lived experience, it's a form of research that is recognised now. It didn't used to be recognised as an academic form of research, but now it is. Autoethnography. Autoethnography is wisdom based on lived experience, and it uses a scientific method. When we think about the scientific method, we start with an observation, we start with a question, and we have to cultivate that question, that observation. We have to cultivate it in a robust and rigorous way, and we need data. Well, what is the data? The data. Gerard showed us examples of his lived experience through those conferences, because all those photographs that they have taken, all those videos that they have created, they are data. That is the data that we cultivate, that we churn to create an autoethnographic form of research, that we create knowledge through that. So my aim today is to inspire you to create something valuable from nothing. It's to inspire you to think a thought that is new, think of an idea that is new, think of a relationship that you can cultivate that is new. All of those are forms of creativity. And as in Gerard's video, the example of the ode to a sunflower. An ode to a sunflower is an example of creating something from nothing. It's an observation. It's an observation and its reflections, and the recording of that exerts power. Because somebody wrote that poem, and today we've listened to that poem and we felt inspired by that poem, so it generates something. So when we record something, so for example, a book is a record, a book is a record, a photograph is a record, an article is a record, a video is a record, a conference is a record. These are all records that create an imprint. And in creating an imprint, we're creating a footstep, we're creating a shape, and that imprint in its existence exerts power. So that's my aim for today. Where is my presentation? Okay. So that's my aim, is to inspire you to create something valuable from nothing. And we'll start with this question. This is an example of a question. So my question is, how do horses help us to tap into our innate wisdom beyond the realms of thinking and feeling? Very often, learning is about about thinking or it's about learning, but horses help us to transcend that form of learning. Okay? It helps us to transcend simply the cognitive, simply the emotional. So we go to a realm which is beyond the emotions and it's beyond the thinking. So that question, you don't have to have that same question. What I'd like you to do on your pieces of paper is please write a question. The only thing that you need to have in that question is horses and learning. The rest, you form a question that is meaningful to you, please. Could you write it down? A question that would be meaningful for you to explore during this conference. The only two words you need to have in that question is horses and learning, but you can make the question any which way you like, or you can copy this one. So either copy this one or make your own question. And when you have, so is everyone done with that? So just horses and learning. Question. Once you get the question, on another sheet of paper, please, please draw a grid, a matrix, where you've got, in one matrix, you've got the word symbols. In the second grid, you've got metaphors. In the other one, you've got images, and you've got poems. Because very often, when we're thinking about innate wisdom expresses itself, it emerges either through a symbol or a sign. It emerges through metaphors. We see something, it's an image, or it comes out as a poem. And a poem can be just, 3 words can be a poem. Okay, 3 words put together in a magical way can be a poem. Okay, so just on your paper, just have those 4 grids, because when I ask you a question, it's very tempting to simply respond to your thinking. And what I'd like you to do today is, because that's what we always do, you ask the question, you automatically respond through language. But today, just kind of practice taking a step back and thinking about a response which is symbolic, a response which is an image instead of language, a response which may be poetic. Okay, so I won't, when I ask you a question, I won't be looking for immediate knee-jerk responses. I'll be asking you to look at your piece of paper. Is there something that you can draw, or a sign that you can jot down on your piece of paper before you respond? So, the book that I wrote is an autoethnography. It's based on my lifelong journey of learning over the last 60 years or so. And as an educator, I have identified that the 3 most powerful, in my experience, the 3 most powerful learning strategies are stories, synthesis, and questions. Why? Why stories? Stories are great for learning, as a learning device, because they allow us to connect complex things. So they allow us to connect the dots. They allow us to feel as well as think. They allow us to make interpretations which go beyond the surface level, and they're accessible, because a story, when you have students and everyone's at a different level, the story will be interpreted based on the level that we are at. Because we all remember the stories we heard when we were children, like Snow White and Robin Hood, and those stories when we were children, we interpreted those stories differently compared with how we interpret them now. So stories, the same story can have a different level of meaning and its different complexity. So stories and questions, similarly, questions, I can ask you a question, and it may seem a superficial question to one person, but to another person, it can seem like a profound question, because it's not the question, it's the interpretation, that is profound. So, leadership. I just wanted to say that the story that I've told about my own lifelong journey in learning is one of leadership, because in my family, I was the first female to go to school. My mother didn't have the privilege of going to school. My grandmother didn't have the privilege of going to school. So I was the first in my family to go to school as a 4-year-old little girl. And then I was the first in my family to go to university. 2 brothers had gone to university before me, but I was the first girl to go to university. And I was the first in my family to get a PhD, to get a doctorate. So in my family, I'm seen to be a leader because I kind of step out of my comfort zone. I'm continuously learning, So it's this journey of, and now I've said to a few of you, my mother tongue is Punjabi, and now after all this time of getting a PhD in English, now I'm learning my own language. You see, so it's going back from the basics, and I'm teaching my 4-year-old great niece Punjabi, and I'm just one step ahead of her as I teach you. So the book, you see, when you're writing an autoethnography, it can't just simply be a description of your lived experience, of course. You have to see that journey through a lens. So I saw the journey through the lens of being an educator, and you need to have a structure. A story needs to have a structure. So I structured it in 3 parts. I talked about why we learn, I talked about how we learn, and what we learn. And all of these things are very meaningful. So first of all, we know that we've been learning from the day we were born, because in the first minute that we were born, what's the first thing we learned to do? We learned to breathe. Okay? We learned to breathe, and we learned to avoid danger eventually, without ever going to school. There's so many things that we learned to do without ever having been formally taught how to do it. Okay, so that's part of our innate wisdom. It's instinctual wisdom. It's wisdom that is passed down through the generations, through our DNAs. That is really obvious. But what I noticed, so you see, apart from the obvious, we have to kind of make meaning of our own experience, and in a way structure it. And so in my experience, I thought, well, there are various reasons why we learn. We learn to survive, we learn to grow, and we learn to flourish. And I've been looking back at my journey in EAHAE, and I know that when I first came to the conference, over 15 years ago, I was very much in this survive kind of mode. The survive mode, because I was teaching teenagers at that time in London, and it was like, anyone who's taught teenagers, it was like survival mode. It's like, and I suppose I was looking for a way out of it through the horsework. I wanted to, there has to be more than this. There has to be something, more that will be meaningful to them. So horses, for me, at that time, was a way out. It was a way out from that, it wasn't comfortable, it was very uncomfortable. But you see, and then grow, like when I was in California at the conference in 2016, I wasn't teaching teenagers, I was teaching people who actually wanted to listen to me at that time, and I was doing my PhD, so I was very much in the grow mode at that point. And now, 15 years later, I truly believe I'm in the flourish mode, and the reason I know I'm in the flourish mode is that I'm able now to do so much voluntary work to help others, just simply to share my knowledge. And I don't even have to, this is the truth, I really don't have to care about whether it's paid or not paid, because I have that security. So what I've noticed is that when we're in survival mode, we're usually looking for safety, security, comfort and adaptation. We want to adapt to our environment. And when we are growing, we're looking for more freedom, we're looking for more choices, we're looking to refine our skills. And when we are flourishing, which is, that is our aspiration, to flourish, then we're at that point of creativity and fulfillment, and we can be thinking about emancipation. How do we overcome, the shackles that are confining us? How do we create this legacy? So, but remember, this is all a cycle. We don't always stay in the survival mode. I could be flourishing today, but tomorrow I'm back in the survival mode. I have a problem at work, but that Martin knows about, and it could be that next week I don't have a job, and so I would be back in the survival mode again. And so these are not stages. It's not as though it's a linear progression that, eventually I'm kind of flourishing and I'm going to live happily ever after. It's not like that. It's cyclical and it overlaps, and it's a constant circle. But these are the circles of learning. As an educator, I try to make sure that when I'm preparing a curriculum, I need to make sure I'm not only stimulating students to explore and to discover. That's the tendency. It's like, let's explore, let's discover, let's explore, let's discover. It's like, there's no time for rest. There has to be time for rest. There has to be time for celebration. Without that celebration, we're just going to burn out. We're going to burn out our students because we're not allowing them to simply relax and to enjoy what they've achieved. So, metaphorically, think about yourself. Think about yourself at this point in time. So, remember I asked you to draw that grid. On that grid, metaphorically, would you say that in terms of your learning, do you identify more with winter, with spring, with summer, or with autumn? Where are you at now? And maybe you have a totally different metaphor to this. Maybe you have a totally different metaphor, but there has to, there could be a metaphor that describes your learning journey at this point in time. When we are simply resting, relaxing, we learn through immersion. With the horses, for example, we can just simply be immersed in that environment, and we're learning simply, not by doing anything, not by thinking anything, not even by feeling, but just simply being there. We learn through osmosis. And when we are talking with each other, we're co-creating those conversations, and there's knowledge being created when we're celebrating, when we're sharing. But how do we learn? That's the next question. How do we learn? This is an important question. How do we learn? Because in the classroom, in the traditional classroom, very often we're learning from what other people, there's three main sources of data for our learning. First person, ourselves. Second person, the we, co-creation. And then there's the third person, the expert knowledge. And in traditional classrooms, the tendency is that we focus on the third person. The first person is our intuition, it's our observations, it's our trial and error. It's our experimentation, our dreams, the synchronicity that we experience, that we generate. It's ours. When we're working with the horses, we're usually learning through first person, and we're learning through the shared, that immersion, that shared experience with others. But in the traditional classroom, we tend to learn more often than not from that third person other people's theories. And I'm always saying this to my students. I teach MBA students, and they have to, what my job is to help them to implement the knowledge into their organisations. I have to coach them to implement the knowledge. And I'm always saying to them, because they're talking about theories like Kotter's theories of change and Porter's theories, 5 forces, and it's like, well, you know, Porter made those, he created those theories, they're just his assumptions. They're assumptions based on his observations, based on his trial and error, okay? But that's all it is, and we have to challenge assumptions. We have to challenge assumptions, challenge these, you know, what other people are saying, and see, well, how does that connect with what I think? How does it connect with my own lived experience? What do we think about it? So when I do autoethnography, the lived experience part is my own intuition, my own observations, my own reflections. So that's the lived experience part. But then it has to go together with the shared. It's like, well, this is, as an educator, this is what I think. What do you think? You know, what do we think? You know, does this sound right? We bounce off ideas. So, you know, so I'm talking about I as myself, and we're talking about we as educators, and then the experts. You know, obviously we have to learn from experts because life is too short. We can't be doing the trial and error. You know, we wouldn't live long enough to do all the experiments we want to do. So obviously we have to learn from others, but we have to take what they are saying with a pinch of salt and always be thinking, well, how, you know, is that really true? Because being an academic, you know, I know several of us in the room are academics, and as academics, when we're being honest, we know that most of the articles, the majority, are hardly ever read. They're hardly ever read, and there are statistics to show that, you know, somebody can kind of create a theory, and then many years down, and it's a 4-star journal. They've published it in a 4-star journal, and further down the line, you know, people challenge it and you know, knock it to bits, basically. So it was just, you know, it wasn't what it was made out to be. We know that. So yeah. So on your piece of paper, can you now think of either a symbol or an image, or, you know, like a 3-word poem or whatever, to say, well, how do you learn? How do you want to learn at this conference? Do you want to, you know, how will you combine that balance of learning from your own intuition, your lived experience, sharing conversations with others, and that expert wisdom that people will be sharing with you? So just put something on, just jot something down, whatever it is, a word, a line, an image, a metaphor, something. So the next question after why we learn and how we learn is what. What do we learn? Okay. Now, what we learn, obviously, what we learn needs to be important, it needs to be relevant, it needs to be useful. That's obvious, right? You know, that's obvious. It needs to be accessible. Accessible means at the right level. It can't be, you know, if somebody tries to teach me rocket science, it's way above my head. It's not accessible to me. And it has to be the right amount. If somebody gives me too much information, it's overwhelming, it's not accessible because I'll tune out, okay? So those criteria are obvious. But what is not obvious, in a lot of school education, a lot of university education, what is not obvious is that it needs to be important based on who we are. You see? It needs to be important based on who we are. Who we are internally, who we are externally, and who we are in the dynamics of our relationships. And I learned that because I learned that, I suppose, the hard way, because at the moment I work with MBA students, but I did my MBA 20 years ago. And when I did my MBA, the knowledge that I gained was not at all relevant to who I was. I didn't see myself in that curriculum. You know, I passed the exams, I got the qualification, but it wasn't relevant to me, okay? It wasn't relevant to me. There was nothing in that knowledge which reflected who I am. So that's a fundamental criteria, is that we have to make it relevant. We have to make what we are teaching, it has to be important. So we have to know who it is, who the audience is. We have to tap into, you know, the inner and the outer. And the only way I can know what's inside you is by speaking with you. And you will only share what you feel comfortable in sharing. So I will never know the entirety. I will never know the entirety of what you're thinking. I'll only know what you're willing to share with me. So we have to be humble enough to know that there is so much that we don't know, and we have to build that trust. You know, so in order to tap into someone else's internal, there has to be that trust. There has to be that safety. Sorry, has it stopped working?
No, it's funny noise, it's funny.
Sorry, is it the battery's on?
It's not internal battery, it's external battery.
Thanks very much. So you see, you know who you are, right? And this is something that you don't have to share with others. So on your piece of paper, now think about what you need to learn at this conference. Because the what you need to learn is totally personal to you. So, you know, just draw either a symbol, something, you know, either a word or an image, something that is meaningful to you. You don't have to share it. That thing needs to be a reminder for you of who you are. Who you are. You see, who you are is your identity, it's your values, your beliefs, your behaviour. That, you know, those things, most people here will say, yeah, we know that, we know it's about our identities, it's about values, our beliefs, but very often we forget it's also about our relationships. You see, who we are is not simply in isolation. Who we are, we need to think about who we are in terms of our connection with others. Who we are in connection with others. So when you think about what do I need to learn, you know, what's my identity? When I first came to EAHAE 15 years ago, I wanted to be, I suppose I wanted to be an equestrian. You know, that's what I was, I thought, yeah, it's wonderful working with horses. It's like, let me learn how to work with horses. Let me know everything there is to work with horses and become an equestrian and have fly fusions like Gerald and Karen. That's my dream. And, but that's not who I am, you see. And so it's not who I am. And I am an educator, I am a writer, I am a teacher, and I learned, I suppose I learned to flourish when I realised that I have all the resources. I have all the resources that I need to be who I am. All I need to be a writer is either a pen or, like a keyboard. That's all I need. That's all I need, because that's who I am. I am a writer. I am a writer. I am a researcher, and I love being around horses. But I don't need to be an equestrian, and so I don't need money that I don't have. I don't need clients that I don't have. Or so because I have everything that I need, I'm able at this point in time to share, to share abundantly, and to leave a legacy, to make an imprint. So this question about who are we? Who are we? What is our identity? And now, the most important question is, we're here to learn, right? But how do we know, how will we know that we have learned? How will we know that we have learned? Now, how will we know that we have learned? Very often, it's to do with a change, it's to do with a transformation. And at the deepest level, it's a transformation in identity, which for me it was. My identity transformed from, this identity of like, I suppose I felt like the first time I came, I felt like a lost soul. I didn't think that I belonged teaching teenagers in inner city London. That was not my space. But I was a lost soul, and I found my place, my sense of belonging, when I realised what I do best is I write, and I'm good at that, and it helps people. I've written about my community. I come from a family of pioneers. My forefathers created a village which has been established for 300 years, and it's got 100,000 people now. That was four brothers that did that. So writing about that, digging into my own roots, is the place of power for me. And for that, because they've created that legacy over the last 300 years, there's nothing that I need. And so that identity is my place of power. It's where I feel that this is who I am, and then I just have to think about my relationships. And that's the thing. It's like, well, who do I need to be sharing this with? Who can I create something from nothing with? Going back to that creativity definition. Creativity is the art of creating something from nothing. Conversations. A conversation can be incredibly powerful. So for yourself, just think about who you are. What will be the change in your identity? Perhaps at the end of this conference, will there be a transformation in your identity? Will there be a transformation in your values, in your beliefs, in your assumptions? Will there be a change in your relationships? What are the relationships that you will cultivate? Some of the relationships that I've had, like with Gerard, Karen, Albert, several people here who I've known, David, Sharon, I've known them for over 15 years now. So there's power in that. There's power in those relationships, 15 years of like, so, they say that's nothing, but that nothing is that vacuum, that empty space, and that empty space is powerful. And so that's what the horses can help us with. It's like being in that space of that nothingness. That nothingness where things emerge from inside, insights and ideas and poems. And so, if anyone would like to share now, or anything that they would like to anchor in terms of what would be an outcome for you. Because like an aim, an aspiration is that you will create something from nothing. What could that be? It can be, you can think of something generic. It doesn't have to be very personal. What could be, by the end of these 2-3 days of the conference, what could be your something from nothing? What could it be?
A solid commitment to creating relationships with one so that I can work with them.
Anyone else? Yeah.
I wrote, as a single word poem, I wrote like fully, which is just a invented word, which is a combination of likely and hopefully.
What's the word, please?
Like fully.
Thank you.
Great, you created a new word. Anyone else? How will you know that you've learnt? How will you know by the end of Saturday evening, how will you know that something has happened here that is generative? How will you know that something has happened which is creative? How will you know that something has happened which will lead to positive consequences, the ripple effect? How will you know?
You will be very tired.
Rest. So you'll be in the rest mode, like immersion, you know, the osmosis, just absorbing everything. You see? Karen, I did think of you, you know, when I was thinking about the rest and just taking everything in, you know? Anyone else? How do you know?
New ideas.
Great.
I also think the celebration of self, where you've been, where you are, where you're going.
Yeah.
And I think along the lines of what Robin's saying is owning who I am. Like really owning that and presenting it everywhere I go, not just in certain areas.
Yes, Jackie.
I think my horses sent me here and expect me to bring back some connection with the herd here to my herd there, so bridging between horse herds.
Yeah, that's right. Bridges are an example of creativity, aren't they?
You know this picture in a picture, you are not able to see it. And if you are able to see it afterwards, you are never ever able to see it not. And maybe some people are able to see pictures in the picture afterwards.
Anyone else? How will you know? Yeah, go ahead.
It inspired me to think of somebody in Leicester in the UK who runs an outfit called the Urban Equestrian, and they have the catchphrase, "We ride too," that ethnic minority inner city private areas of Leicester are getting access to learning through horses. And I think they might be very interested in what we do, and I don't think they know about this, so
Well, there's got to be a bridge between you and I there, you know? And so that bridge was already in construction yesterday. You know, through, I will know when we meet up back in England. Yeah.
So I think I know that I've learned something that if I had chewed it on my own, if I had digested to maybe to combine it with the sunflower metaphor, and I'm able later on to how to say integrate it and then to bring it to other people, that knowledge.
Yeah.
Spread.
Yeah. So that's a combination of synthesis, right? Excellent. Anyone else?
heart and my mind goes together in awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a deep feeling, and I can, I know I'm not.
Yeah. Yes. So is that, you know, that first person source of information, isn't it? The lived experience is that my intuition. You know, which you're always saying that. I know because I can feel this in my gut. You know, it's my gut instinct. And in the traditional classroom, we don't often teach our students about how to use their gut instinct in an effective way. And that's what the horses allow us to do. The horses allow us to tap into these instincts and, you know, the transcendental, without words, you know, without the thinking, without. Okay, I'm going to hand over to you now for that. Okay. So, okay, thank you very much, everyone.